I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because I am sitting here watching three things happen simultaneously, and almost nobody is connecting all three of them at once. First, crowds are gathering in Tehran's Revolutionary Square, rallying behind a new Ayatollah, a man the world barely knew existed 2 weeks ago, now standing at the head of one of the most powerful theocratic regimes on earth. Second, oil smoke is rising from a burning refinery in Bahrain, a country that was not at war, a country that did not ask to be targeted, a country that simply existed too close to the blast radius of someone else's decision. Third, a presidential family is quietly filing paperwork to take their drone company public on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. All three of these things are happening right now, today, simultaneously. And what I need you to understand, before we go 1 second further, is that these are not three separate stories. They are one story. And that story is the story of what happens when the most powerful military on Earth launches a war without a plan for what comes after. This is not a news cycle. This is not a moment that will pass by Friday. This is a structural rupture. The war in Iran. The sleeper cell activation signal intercepted by American intelligence. The Trump family drone deal. The Emirates billionaire who just told Lindsey Graham, in writing with his name on it, to keep his hands off the Gulf. And the Strait of Hormuz, carrying 20% of the world's traded oil, effectively closed while Brent crude crosses $119 a barrel. In the next 25 minutes, I am going to walk you through every single one of these threads, connect every dot, and leave you with the questions that no one in Washington wants to answer. If you are not subscribed to Daily Brief, now is the time. Hit that subscribe button right now, because the markets open in hours, and you need this context before they do. Let's go. Let's go back 10 days. February 28th, 2026. Before dawn. While most of the world was asleep, while families were waking up to ordinary mornings in ordinary cities, a joint United States-Israeli military operation launched simultaneous air strikes on Iran. The operation was later named Operation Epic Fury. In the opening hours, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed. Dozens of senior Iranian officials died alongside him. The decapitation of a foreign government executed in a single night. It was the most dramatic dismantling of a foreign regime since the fall of Baghdad in 2003. And by several measures, it was bigger. The stated justification came from Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar, who said the situation was urgent, that any delay would have allowed Iran to reach a level of nuclear immunity, enabling mass production of long-range ballistic missiles capable of threatening the entire region. That was the trigger. That was the rationale. That was the moment the decision was made to act. And what has followed in the 10 days since has not been what the architects of Operation Epic Fury promised. It has not been swift. It has not been clean. It has not been the short, decisive operation that administration officials projected. What it has been is a slow-motion expansion. A war that was supposed to end in weeks, showing every sign of lasting months. A regional disruption that is rapidly becoming a global economic emergency. And the picture is getting more complicated by the hour. So let me take you through the three announcements that define where we are right now. Three developments that together paint a picture that is darker and more consequential than anything you are seeing in the mainstream headlines. We start with the most alarming one. Announcement number 1. Iran is activating sleeper assets. And the United States government has confirmed it. I want to be very clear about what I am about to tell you. This is not speculation. This is not a think tank projection. This is not an opposition talking point designed to score political points. According to ABC News, United States law enforcement agencies received a federal alert confirming that the government intercepted an encrypted transmission believed to have originated inside Iran, a transmission that may serve as an operational trigger for prepositioned sleeper assets operating outside the country. Read that sentence carefully. An operational trigger for prepositioned sleeper assets operating outside the country. The alert referenced preliminary signals analysis of a transmission relayed across multiple countries in the hours immediately following two specific events: the announcement of Khamenei's death and the naming of his son, Mojtaba, as the new supreme leader. The timing is not a coincidence. That sequencing is deliberate. Now here is the part that should concern you most. The alert also cautioned that there is currently no operational threat tied to a specific location. Law enforcement agencies have been instructed to increase monitoring of suspicious radio frequencies. They do not know the target. They do not know when. They do not know where. FBI Director Kash Patel stated that he instructed counterterrorism and intelligence teams to be on high alert and mobilize all assisting security assets. He added that while the U.S. military is handling force protection overseas, the FBI remains at the forefront of deterring attacks here at home. During a Pentagon briefing on March 2nd, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told reporters that the United States is ready for Iranian sleeper cell attacks on American soil, describing the Iranian government as, in his words, a regime that seeks to export its ideology and try to sow terror. Senator Ted Cruz, speaking on ABC News, pointed to what he called a real danger, warning that sleeper cells could be carrying out acts of terrorism inside the United States and that law enforcement is being vigilant. Whether you accept his political framing or not, the underlying intelligence assessment that Iran has prepositioned assets in multiple countries around the world is not disputed by anyone in the professional intelligence community. Left, right, or center. It is simply a fact. And here is the part that almost no one is explaining clearly. Sleeper networks are not improvised. They are not panicked responses. They are patient, long-term, deeply embedded infrastructure designed to survive exactly this kind of decapitation strike. Iran has spent decades building these networks. In Europe, in Latin America, in the Gulf, potentially inside the United States itself. Cells of individuals living quiet, ordinary lives, working jobs, raising families, maintaining cover until the day they receive the signal to act. The death of Khamenei does not deactivate those networks. It does not dissolve those loyalties. It does not erase those instructions. In fact, the death of Khamenei may have activated them. That is the calculation Iran's planners made when they built these networks. The decapitation of the leadership triggers the response. The assassination is not the end of the threat. It is the beginning of a different, more dispersed, harder-to-target threat. And that is the part that should keep you up at night. Announcement number 2. Iran is losing the missile war and winning the drone war. And that asymmetry, that gap between the two, could drag this conflict out not for weeks, but for months. Let me give you the military picture, as clearly as I can. As analyzed by the Center for European Policy Analysis, the central military dynamic of this conflict can be summarized as a race to the bottom of aerial munition stockpiles. Iran's strategy is to deplete regional missile defense arsenals, to fire enough projectiles that the air defense systems run out of interceptors before Iran runs out of things to fire. Meanwhile, the United States and Israel are attempting to locate and destroy Iranian missile launchers before they can fire, while degrading Iran's command and control infrastructure and its missile production capacity. Here is the current score. Iran has launched approximately 600 to 700 ballistic missiles in the first 6 days of this war. American and Israeli strikes have degraded Iran's mobile missile launchers, making large-scale coordinated barrages harder to execute. The rate of ballistic missile fire has dropped sharply over the past week. But the drones have not stopped. Iran is estimated to hold upward of 70,000 drones capable of being launched across the Persian Gulf region. And this is where the math becomes devastating for the American side. To combat Iran's Shahid-136 drones, which cost approximately $20,000 each to produce, America's armed forces are being forced to use Patriot and THAAD interceptors. Interceptors that cost millions of dollars each. Interceptors that take years to manufacture. Interceptors that cannot be replaced quickly no matter how fast Lockheed Martin and Raytheon work their production lines. Defense experts cited by The Hill say Iran can sustain drone attacks for months at the current rate of fire. Pentagon officials reportedly conceded in closed-door briefings with lawmakers that waves of Iranian-launched drones are punching through air defenses, leaving American troops and bases in the Persian Gulf region exposed and vulnerable. 7 Americans have been killed. President Trump met with Lockheed Martin and Raytheon on Friday and claimed they agreed to quadruple production of high-end interceptors. But even on the most accelerated possible schedule, Those weapons cannot arrive fast enough to change the immediate picture on the ground. And here is the deeper problem. Iran's drone production is dispersed. It is not concentrated in a single factory or a single facility that can be targeted from the air the way a missile manufacturing complex can be. As one defense expert put it, the problem with these Shahid drones is that you can disperse production much more widely, making it much harder to identify where production is happening at all. The United States is spending millions of dollars to intercept weapons that cost $20,000 each. Iran has tens of thousands of them. And Iran can keep making more. That math does not resolve itself in 4 to 5 weeks. That math does not resolve itself quickly under any scenario that currently exists. Now, let me show you what this is doing to the region around the conflict. Bapco Energies, Bahrain's state-run energy company, declared force majeure on Monday, March 9, 2026, after its Sitra refinery, with a capacity of 405,000 barrels per day, was damaged in an Iranian drone attack. The strike affected not only refinery units but also nearby residential areas, damaging homes, injuring at least 32 civilians. Qatar Energy made a similar declaration after 2 of its liquefied natural gas facilities were struck, forcing a production pause and sending fresh volatility through global energy markets. Saudi Arabia reported its first civilian deaths from Iranian attacks. A water desalination plant in Bahrain was hit, targeting the infrastructure that produces the fresh water that people in that country drink. Passengers at Dubai International Airport were rushed into train tunnels after explosions were reported nearby. Kuwait reported fuel tank strikes at its international airport. A British base in Cyprus was struck by a drone. A French facility in Abu Dhabi was targeted. A base hosting Italian troops in Kuwait was hit. Iran has targeted at least 10 countries in 10 days. 10 countries where American and allied forces are stationed or where critical infrastructure sits. Global oil prices have spiked. Brent crude hit an intraday high of $119.50 per barrel. The threat to the Strait of Hormuz has created what amounts to an effective closure. Commercial shipping has halted in the region due to extreme risk and the complete withdrawal of war risk insurance. This is not a price spike. This is a structural disruption to global energy supply. And based on everything the military picture tells us, it is getting worse, not better. If you are getting value from this breakdown, hit like right now. Subscribe to Daily Brief if you have not already. Share this with someone who is trying to make sense of what is happening. Because we're only getting started. Now we come to announcement number 3. And I want you to pay very close attention here. Because this one deserves far more scrutiny than it is currently receiving. While American service members are dying in the Persian Gulf, while oil prices are crushing working families at the pump and in the grocery store, while the world's most important shipping lane is effectively closed, the president's sons just filed to take a drone company public on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. As reported by the Wall Street Journal, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump are investing in a Florida-based drone company called Perusi that is vying to meet fresh demand from the Pentagon. Demand that was created when the Trump administration itself banned foreign-made drones and drone components from the United States market back in December. The company will soon be going public by merging with Ares Greenway Holdings, a publicly traded golf course holding company also backed by the Trump family, and is expected to debut on the Nasdaq in the coming months. Let me lay out the chain of events as simply as I can, because it is important that you see the full sequence. Step 1. The Trump administration bans Chinese drones and drone components from the U.S. market. Step 2. The ban creates a significant market gap. American military and commercial buyers suddenly need American-made alternatives. Step 3. The president's sons invest in a company positioned to fill exactly that gap. Step 4. A war is launched that drives up Pentagon demand for exactly the product that company makes. Step 5. The joint U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran mark the first time the Pentagon has used one-way attack drones in combat, proving their battlefield value and driving further demand. Step 6. The company files to go public. The drone company's CEO, Andrew Fox, told the Wall Street Journal, and I want you to hear this quote, "The drone market is certainly going to grow faster than golf courses." He said that while service members are being buried, Dylan Hetler-Gadet of the Nonpartisan Project on Government Oversight told ABC News that everyone who is making those decisions is certainly aware of who is involved in those companies, and that it is therefore hard to trust the integrity of those decisions. This is not a hypothetical ethics debate happening in an academic journal somewhere. This is a live conflict. People are dying. Families are grieving. And NASDAQ paperwork is being filed. I am going to ask you directly, does this deserve more scrutiny than it is currently getting? Drop a comment below. Because the silence around this story in the mainstream press is itself a story. Now let me pull back and show you the wider chessboard. Because the most powerful statement to emerge from this conflict in the last 48 hours did not come from Washington. It did not come from Tel Aviv. It did not come from Tehran. It came from Dubai. Khalif Ahmad Al-Habtoor, founding chairman of the Al-Habtoor Group, one of the most influential private business empires in the entire United Arab Emirates, a man whose word carries enormous weight across the Gulf, published an open letter responding directly to Senator Lindsey Graham's weekend television appearances. Graham had called on Gulf Cooperation Council countries to enter the war directly. He said they were also under attack. He said they needed to join the fight. Al-Habtoor's response was surgical. It was precise. And it was devastating. He wrote that he heard Senator Graham calling on the Gulf states to join the fight and stated clearly, "We know full well why we are under attack." He wrote that hasty American decisions are what embroiled this region in a war whose people were not party to its decision-making and whose local allies were not consulted before it was launched. He acknowledged the Iranian threat, acknowledged it directly, without qualification. But then he called this conflict a dirty game in which several powers clash at the expense of the region, with no honor in it and no transparency. Then he addressed something Graham had said on television. Graham had stated on camera for the American public that Iran and Venezuela together hold 31% of global oil reserves, and that controlling that share would be a nightmare for China, and that if the Iranian regime changes, the United States would make a lot of money. Al-Habtoor's response in writing, "It is obvious that this is what it is all about. Oil control. Money." And then he wrote the line that should be read in every foreign policy seminar and every defense ministry in the world. He wrote, "We will not sacrifice our sons in a conflict that could have been avoided through diplomacy. We value the lives of our sons. We do not treat their souls as collateral damage, as some do." And to Senator Graham, who had argued that Gulf states benefit from American protection and arms sales and therefore owe America their military cooperation, Al-Habtoor said plainly, "We do not need your protection. All we want from you is to keep your hands off us." This is not a polite diplomatic disagreement. This is not a gentle pushback from a junior partner. This is a foundational challenge to the entire premise of American strategic leadership in the Gulf. A challenge made publicly, in writing, with a name attached to it. When the chairman of one of the Gulf's most powerful private empires tells Washington, in print, for the world to read, "We will not follow," that is a structural signal. That is a moment. And Washington should treat it as one. Because the Gulf is watching. The Gulf is calculating. And the Gulf is not following. Meanwhile, in Tehran, Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the man America helped kill, has not made a single public statement since taking power. Not one word. Not one appearance. Not one address to the Iranian people or to the world. The silence is either tactical or it reflects a regime in genuine disarray, or both. And we do not yet know which. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian offered an apology for Iranian attacks on neighboring countries, an extraordinary statement under any circumstances, one that would have been unthinkable before this war. But hardliners criticized it immediately and said the war strategy would continue regardless of what the president said. The new supreme leader has still not spoken. And then there is the question of what happened on the first day of the war. Evidence has mounted, as reported by PBS, indicating that the United States was behind a deadly strike on a girls' school in Iran on the opening day of the conflict. A strike that killed at least 165 children. President Trump, when asked about it, suggested Iran was to blame, that Iran had struck its own school. The Arab world noticed the discrepancy. The images circulated. The questions spread. And inside Iran, and this is the critical part, the strikes appear to have produced an outcome that the administration did not anticipate and did not plan for. People inside Iran who were frustrated with the clerical regime. People who had protested against the government for years. People who wanted change, who wanted freedom, who had reason to resent the Ayatollahs. Those people are now directing their anger outward. Toward the United States. Toward the strikes. Toward the images of dead children. The administration may have hoped that bombing Iran would fracture Iranian society and accelerate the regime's collapse. The early evidence suggests the opposite is happening. The bombs are rallying Iranians around the new supreme leader, uniting them against a common external enemy in ways that years of clerical repression could not. This is not a new phenomenon in the history of warfare. It has happened before. The architects of this operation should have known it was possible. Whether they planned for it is a separate question. Back in Washington, the political responses have ranged from the carefully calculated to the genuinely extraordinary. Vice President J.D. Vance, speaking at a military dignitary ceremony, chose his words very carefully, referring to this conflict as simply a conflict with Iran. Not a war, not an operation, a conflict. The language of a politician keeping every legal and political option open. Congressman Tom Emmer, speaking from the GOP retreat at Trump's own Doral Resort in Miami, attending a political gathering at the president's private club while service members are being buried, called this a short-term experience and predicted it would be over in short order. Oil was at $115 a barrel when he said that. And then there is the Israeli assessment, the one that should matter most to anyone trying to understand the realistic timeline of this conflict. The Israeli military's chief of staff issued a warning that the war will take a long time. That is not spin. That is not opposition rhetoric. That is a military assessment from the country that co-designed and co-launched the operation. The country that arguably has the most accurate picture of what Iranian military capacity actually looks like. When the chief of staff of the Israeli military says this will take a long time, believe him. Because he has access to information that no television anchor, no senator at a resort in Miami, and no presidential family filing NASDAQ paperwork has. Let me be direct with you now. Because this is not an abstract, geopolitical story. This is a story with direct, concrete consequences for your life, your finances, and your safety. The Strait of Hormuz carries roughly 20% of the world's traded oil. Every day it stays effectively closed, which it currently is, the global economy absorbs a shock it was not built to sustain indefinitely. If you live somewhere that imports oil, and that is almost every country on Earth, this is already showing up in your prices. At the pump, at the grocery store, in your energy bill, in the cost of every product that was shipped on a container that runs on fuel. If you work in aviation, shipping, manufacturing, or agriculture, this conflict is already inside your supply chain. The disruption is not coming. It is here. If you have investments tied to energy markets, you have already felt the repricing. Every percentage point that oil climbs above its pre-war price is a transfer of wealth from consumers and businesses around the world to the energy sector and to the governments and families positioned to benefit from higher oil prices. If you are in the military, the risk is not theoretical. 7 Americans are already dead. More are in harm's way. Every day, the conflict continues. And if you are anywhere near the Gulf region, traveling, working, or living there, you are already inside the blast radius of someone else's strategic calculation. This is not distant. This is not something happening on the other side of the world to other people. This is now. And the question of how long it lasts and how far it spreads is being determined right now by decisions being made in Washington, in Tel Aviv, in Tehran, and in Dubai, not always with your interests at the top of the agenda. So, where does this go from here? Let me give you the 2 scenarios as I see them, without spin, without wishful thinking, without the optimism that politicians reach for because the truth is too uncomfortable. Path 1. Mojtaba Khamenei, facing a fractured government, a battered military and economy under catastrophic strain, and the weight of leading a country whose founder and supreme leader was just assassinated, signals willingness to negotiate through back-channel contacts in Qatar or Oman. The 2 Gulf states that have historically served as intermediaries between Iran and the West. A ceasefire framework emerges. The Strait of Hormuz reopens. Oil falls. The Trump administration declares victory. History books record Operation Epic Fury as a decisive success. That path is theoretically available, but consider what it requires. It requires Mojtaba Khamenei to negotiate a deal that ends the war that killed his father. It requires Iran's hardliners, who already criticized a simple diplomatic apology from the president, to stand down and accept terms. It requires all of this to happen within days, before the humanitarian and economic damage in the Gulf becomes irreversible and before the sleeper network activates somewhere in the world. That is a very narrow window. And every day that passes, it narrows further. Path 2. Iran endures. The drones keep flying. The ballistic missiles continue, degraded but not eliminated. The sleeper network activates somewhere, maybe in Europe, maybe in a Gulf financial hub, maybe inside the United States, and the conflict expands beyond the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz stays effectively closed for weeks or months. Oil holds above $120. Global insurance markets freeze for Gulf region shipping. Supply chains that were already fragile snap under the sustained pressure. The war that was promised to be short becomes the war that defines this presidency. The Gulf states, having been told they were not consulted, having watched their infrastructure get targeted, having read al-Habtour's letter, quietly but decisively begin to decouple from American strategic leadership. Not dramatically, not overnight, but methodically, irreversibly. Alliances that took decades to build erode in months. China, watching from the sidelines, moves into the diplomatic vacuum that American unilateralism has created. The dollar's role as the petrodollar faces its most serious structural challenge in 50 years. Based on everything the military picture tells me, based on the Israeli chief of staff's own assessment, based on the drone math, based on the sleeper cell signal, based on al-Habtour's letter, I think we are closer to path 2 than anything coming out of Washington will tell you. I want to be wrong about that. But the evidence does not support optimism right now. Let me leave you with the questions that cut through everything else. When a government launches a war that its closest regional allies say they were never consulted about, a war already costing civilian lives across 10 countries, a war producing exactly the kind of unification of Iranian public opinion against America that strategic planners should have anticipated, is that a decision made in the national interest? Or is it a decision made in someone's interest? When a family financially positioned to profit from weapons demand launches a war that drives exactly that demand, and then files NASDAQ paperwork in the middle of the conflict, is that governance? Or does it deserve a different name entirely? When a senator goes on national television and says the purpose of this war is to control oil and make America money, and the chairman of the Gulf's most powerful private empire responds by saying we all know, what does that tell you about the gap between the stated reasons for this war and the actual reasons? And finally, the question that history will answer, but that we are living through right now. When the dust settles, when the smoke clears from Bahrain, when the drones finally stop flying, when the new Ayatollah eventually speaks, when the NASDAQ ticker shows the drone company's opening price, which country will emerge stronger? Which alliances will have held? Which principles will have survived? And what will the world have traded to get there? Those are not rhetorical questions. They are the most consequential questions of this moment. And right now, the answers are being determined by decisions made behind closed doors, in Oval Offices and war rooms and resort golf courses and NASDAQ filing centers, not always with you in mind. This story is not over. Not even close. The sleeper cell signal has been intercepted, but not resolved. The drone war is bleeding American air defenses at a rate the production lines cannot match. The Gulf is signaling publicly that it will not follow. The new supreme leader has not yet spoken. And the NASDAQ paperwork is still being processed. Every one of those threads is still live. Every one of them could break in a direction that changes everything. Daily Brief will be here every single day covering every development, connecting giving you the full picture, not the sanitized version, not the spin, not the sound bites. If this analysis gave you something, if it connected something that was not connecting before, please share this video right now. Send it to someone who is trying to understand what is unfolding. Post it. Forward it. Because the people around you deserve to understand the world as it actually is. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, do you think we are headed for path 1 or path 2? Do you think the Trump family drone deal deserves a congressional investigation? Do you think Al Habtour's letter signals a permanent shift in Gulf-American relations? I read every single comment. Everyone. This community is what makes Daily Brief what it is, and your perspective matters. Subscribe if you have not already. Hit the bell so you never miss a breakdown. And share this with at least one person who needs to see the full picture. Because this is not a story that ends this week. And when the next development breaks, and it will break soon, you're going to want to already understand the context. I will see you in the next one.